The dessert plate slipped from Arya's trembling hands in slow motion, chocolate ganache exploding across the most expensive suit in the room. The entire restaurant fell silent. She looked up into eyes as dark and merciless as winter nights. Dante Morelli, the man whose name made grown men whisper. This was it. Her last paycheck, her last chance, gone. But instead of fury, his lips curved into something far more dangerous than anger. You just made the most expensive mistake of your life, he said quietly, sliding a business card across the ruined tablecloth. Or perhaps the most profitable. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Now, let me tell you how a waitress's worst night became the beginning of everything. The Christmas lights strung along Madison Avenue blurred into smears of red and green as Arya Bennett pressed her forehead against the cold window of the crosstown bus. 23 years old, and she felt ancient, worn down to nothing by the relentless grind of survival. The envelope in her coat pocket crinkled when she shifted. Another past due notice, this one stamped in aggressive red letters. Final notice. She'd stopped opening them weeks ago, but the landlord had started taping them to her door, where the neighbors could see her shame. Her father had been dead for 8 months. The cancer had taken him slowly, expensively, leaving her with memories of his laughter and a mountain of medical debt that followed her like a shadow. The life insurance policy he'd always promised turned out to be expired, lapsed during one of the many times he'd chosen to pay for her college textbooks instead of the premium. She dropped out anyway, in the end. No point in studying literature when you couldn't afford to eat. The restaurant where she worked, Luminaire, with its Michelin stars and its clientele who wore watches worth more than her annual salary, loomed ahead through the December darkness. Arya grabbed her bag and pushed through the bus doors into the biting wind. Christmas Eve, the night when wealthy families gathered to celebrate abundance while people like her served their champagne and smiled until their faces ached. The kitchen was already chaos when she arrived. Chef Anton was screaming in French at a line cook who'd oversalted something, and the dishwasher had called in sick, leaving Marcus to handle both stations. Arya tied her apron with practiced efficiency, checking her reflection in the steel refrigerator door. Dark circles under hazel eyes, hair scraped back so severely it made her temples ache. The black uniform that had fit her perfectly 6 months ago now hung loose. Grief and poverty were excellent diets, apparently. Table 12 just sat, Simone hissed, rushing past with a tray of appetizers. 4 top. They look expensive. Everything in Luminaire looked expensive. Arya grabbed her order pad and pushed through the swinging doors into the dining room, where crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in cream linens. The air smelled of money and roasted duck, and the particular kind of contentment that came from never having worried about anything important. Table 12 sat near the window overlooking the avenue. 4 men in tailored suits, the kind of casual wealth that didn't announce itself but didn't need to. 3 of them were laughing at something, their voices carrying the easy confidence of people who'd never been told no. The 4th sat slightly apart, his dark eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made Arya's instincts prickle. She approached with her professional smile firmly in place. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Luminaire. Can I start you with Scotch? One of the laughing men interrupted, not looking at her. Macallan 25. Neat. Same, another chimed in. Arya's pen moved across her pad. She'd learned not to expect please or thank you from this crowd. Of course. And for you, sir? She directed the question to the quiet one, and for the first time his gaze shifted to her face. The impact of it nearly made her step backward. His eyes were the color of espresso, almost black in the candlelight, and they looked at her the way a jeweler might examine a diamond, carefully, thoroughly, assessing every facet. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from granite. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, the only imperfection in an otherwise unsettlingly perfect face. Water, he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, with an accent that suggested Italian roots tempered by American education. Still, no ice. Bourbon for me, the 4th man added. Whatever's top shelf. Arya nodded, acutely aware that the dark-eyed man was still watching her. Not in the way the others occasionally glanced, the quick, up-down assessment that reduced her to a servant in a black dress, but with genuine attention, as if she were a puzzle he was working to solve. She escaped to the bar where Thomas was already preparing drinks for another server. "Table 12 wants Macallan 25, she said. "Two of them." Thomas whistled low. "Must be nice. That's $300 a pour." The amount made Arya's stomach clench. $600 for 2 drinks. She could live for a month on that. Could make a dent in the smallest of her debts. Could maybe, finally, breathe for just a moment. "You okay?" Thomas asked, and she realized she'd frozen, staring at nothing. "Fine," she lied, shaking herself back to the present. "Just tired." The night progressed in its usual rhythm of controlled chaos. Arya moved between tables, her feet aching in the cheap shoes she couldn't afford to replace, her smile never wavering even as her soul screamed with exhaustion. Table 12 ordered appetizers, then entrees, the most expensive items on the menu, of course. The laughing men grew louder with each drink. The quiet one barely touched his water, but his eyes continued to track her movements whenever she approached. It should have been creepy, should have set off all the alarms that living in New York had installed in her nervous system. But there was something different in his attention, not predatory exactly, but evaluative, like he was making calculations she couldn't begin to understand. "Miss?" One of the loud ones snapped his fingers at her as she passed, actually snapped his fingers, like she was a dog. "We're ready for dessert." Arya pulled her order pad from her apron, that professional smile getting harder to maintain. "Of course. What can I—" "Bring us one of everything," the man said, waving his hand dismissively. "And another round of drinks. Except for Dante here. Our boy doesn't know how to have fun." Dante. So the quiet one had a name, Italian, fitting for that face, that accent. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at his companion's words, but he said nothing. "One of everything," Arya confirmed, writing it down even though she'd remember. "I'll have that right out for you." The kitchen was a nightmare. 3 servers had called in sick, of course they had. It was Christmas Eve, and everyone wanted to be with family, leaving the remaining staff scrambling to cover twice as many tables. Arya loaded desserts onto a large tray with shaking hands: chocolate soufflé, creme brulee, tiramisu, panna cotta, fruit tart. The display was beautiful, Instagram-worthy, the kind of thing that would cost more than her grocery budget for a week. She hefted the tray, feeling the weight settle across her shoulders and arms. Too heavy. She should make 2 trips, but she was already behind on her other tables, and the couple at table 7 kept glaring at her for not refilling their wine quickly enough. The path from kitchen to dining room required navigating a narrow corridor where servers passed each other in a carefully choreographed dance. Arya had done it 1,000 times. She knew every step, every turn, every... Marcus came barreling around the corner with a bus tub, moving too fast, not looking. They collided with enough force to send Arya stumbling sideways. The tray tilted. Her hands scrambled for purchase, but physics had already won. Time seemed to slow as the desserts began their inevitable slide toward catastrophe. She heard herself gasp, heard someone in the kitchen shout a warning, heard the entire dining room fall silent as desserts rained down like some kind of terrible, expensive hail. The chocolate soufflé hit first, exploding across the cream carpet. The tiramisu followed, then the panna cotta, each impact producing a sound that echoed in the sudden quiet. But the worst, the absolute worst, was the creme brulee that sailed in a perfect arc and landed face down on the lap of the man in the most expensive suit she'd ever seen. On Dante's lap. The caramelized sugar shattered on impact, custard spread across his thighs in an obscene yellow puddle. Everyone in the restaurant was staring now. Arya stood frozen, the empty tray still clutched in her trembling hands, watching her entire life collapse in real time. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I'm so sorry, I didn't—" Dante stood slowly, custard dripping from his pants, shards of caramelized sugar falling to the carpet. His expression was unreadable, those dark eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to disappear into the floor. His companions had gone quiet, their earlier laughter dying in the face of his absolute stillness. "I'll pay for it," Arya heard herself say, even though the words were absurd. She couldn't pay for a dry cleaning, let alone whatever that suit cost, couldn't pay for anything. "Please, I'm so—" "Excuse us," Dante said quietly, and it took her a moment to realize he was speaking to his dinner companions, not to her. I need to handle this. He moved toward her, and every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet wouldn't cooperate, rooted to the carpet by shame and fear and the absolute certainty that she was about to be fired in front of everyone she worked with. Dante stopped inches away. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, 6'2" at least, with broad shoulders that filled out his ruined jacket. He smelled like expensive cologne and now creme brulee. His hand reached into his inside jacket pocket, and Arya's breath caught in her throat. He pulled out a business card. Plain white, heavy stock, with just a name and a phone number printed in black. No company, no title, no address. Just Dante Morelli. "Call me tomorrow," he said, pressing the card into her hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "Noon. Don't be late." Then he turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving his shocked friends in a dining room full of gawking patrons, and Arya standing in the middle of a dessert crime scene, holding a stranger's business card and wondering if she'd just been offered salvation or signed her own death warrant. The manager's office smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Gerald sat behind his desk, his expression somewhere between exasperated and resigned, while Arya stood with her hands clasped in front of her like a penitent waiting for sentencing. "I should fire you," Gerald said, not for the first time. "Do you have any idea who that was?" "A customer," Arya managed. "I apologized. I offered to—" "That was Dante Morelli." Gerald pronounced the name like it should mean something. "His family owns half the real estate in Manhattan. The other half they're probably in the process of buying, and you dumped dessert on him." "It was an accident. Marcus has worked here for 5 years without incident." Gerald rubbed his temples. "Look, Arya, I know you're going through a hard time. I know about your father, and I'm sorry, but I can't have my servers assaulting the clientele with baked goods." "I understand." She did. She really did. In Gerald's position, she would have fired herself 10 minutes ago. "I'll clear out my locker." "Wait," Gerald sighed heavily. "Morelli paid for his entire table before he left. Paid for the meals they didn't finish, paid for the desserts you destroyed, and left a tip that covered your entire section for the night." He pushed a check across the desk. "He specifically requested this go to you." Arya stared at the check. $2,000. Made out to her name in neat, precise handwriting. $2,000 for dumping custard on his pants. It was absurd. Impossible. Suspicious as hell. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "You can and you will, because I'm not giving it back to one of the most powerful men in New York and telling him his money's no good." Gerald leaned back in his chair. "You're on probation. One more incident like tonight, and I don't care if the Pope himself vouches for you. You're done. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." The check burned in her pocket as she rode the bus home, watching the city slide past the grimy windows. $2,000. It would cover 3 months of rent, or 1 month of rent and a significant chunk of the smallest medical bill. It was more money than she'd seen in one place since her father's funeral, when distant relatives had pressed crumpled 20s into her hand and murmured useless condolences. But it came with conditions. "Call me tomorrow. Noon. Don't be late." Why would a man like Dante Morelli want her to call him? Rich men didn't hand out their private numbers to clumsy waitresses unless they wanted something, and Arya had seen enough of the world to know what men usually wanted. But something about his demeanor tonight had been different. Professional. Almost businesslike. Her apartment building was dark when she arrived, the lobby light still broken from last week. Arya climbed 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been out of service for a month, and fumbled with her keys. Inside, the studio was exactly as she'd left it, neat but threadbare, everything she owned fitting into a space smaller than the kitchen at Luminaire. The eviction notice was taped to her door. She'd stopped being surprised by them. She sat on the edge of her bed and pulled out Dante's business card. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The kind of thing people with money used to signal they had money to people who already knew they had money. Just his name and a phone number. No explanation, no hint of what he wanted. The sensible thing would be to throw it away. Deposit his check, be grateful for the windfall, and forget tonight ever happened. The sensible thing would be to stay in her lane, keep her head down, survive. But survival wasn't working. She was drowning in debt, sinking faster every day despite working double shifts and eating ramen for every meal. In 6 months, maybe less, she'd be evicted. After that, what? Sleep on the subway? Join the growing ranks of the invisible poor who haunted the city's margins? Call me tomorrow, noon. What did she have to lose that wasn't already slipping through her fingers? Arya didn't sleep. She lay in bed watching the ceiling, listening to her upstairs neighbor's footsteps and the distant wail of sirens. At dawn, she gave up and made coffee with the last of her grounds, staring out the window at the city waking up. Christmas morning. Somewhere, families were gathering around trees, exchanging gifts, celebrating togetherness. She had a dead father, a mountain of debt, and a business card from a stranger. At 11:30, she picked up her phone. At 11:45, she set it down again. At 11:59, she dialed. He answered on the first ring. Arya Bennett. Not a question, a statement. He'd been expecting her call, had probably known she would crack. Mr. Morelli. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You asked me to call. I did. Are you free this afternoon? Was she free on Christmas Day when she had no family, no plans, no life outside of grinding poverty? Yes. Good. I'll send a car. 1 hour. Be ready. Wait, where are we? But he'd already hung up. Arya stared at her phone, heart hammering. This was insane. She should call back, cancel, forget this whole thing. Instead, she went to her closet and started pulling out the least terrible clothes she owned. 45 minutes later, she stood in front of her mirror in the only dress she owned that wasn't her work uniform, a simple navy blue sheath she'd bought for her father's funeral. She'd lost weight since then. It hung loose around her waist. Her hair refused to cooperate, so she left it down, hoping the waves would look intentional rather than neglected. A swipe of drugstore mascara. Lip balm that was almost the same as lipstick if you didn't look too close. She looked like exactly what she was, a broke girl trying desperately to appear less broke. The car arrived at exactly 1 o'clock. Not a taxi or an Uber, but an actual town car, black and gleaming, with a driver in a suit who opened the door for her like she was someone who mattered. Miss Bennett, he said, nodding politely. Mr. Morelli is expecting you. The interior smelled like leather and luxury. Arya sank into the back seat, watching her neighborhood give way to progressively nicer ones. They headed uptown, then further uptown, into the realm of doormen and private parks. The car finally stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been teleported from a European capital, all limestone and wrought iron with actual topiaries flanking the entrance. The driver opened her door. Penthouse, he said. They're expecting you. The lobby was all marble and mirrors. The elevator was the kind with an actual operator, an older man in a uniform who smiled at her kindly and didn't comment on the way her hands shook as she tried to smooth her dress. Penthouse, she said, her voice barely audible. Very good, miss. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. Arya watched the floor numbers climb, 10, 20, 30, 40. Finally, it slowed and stopped. The doors opened not onto a hallway, but directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A penthouse that took up the entire top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and ceilings so high they seemed to disappear into the winter light. The furniture was modern and minimal, all clean lines and expensive fabrics. Art hung on the walls, real art, the kind you saw in museums. Everything was white and cream and perfectly, impossibly pristine. Dante stood by the windows, his back to her, silhouetted against the cityscape. He'd changed from last night's ruined suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. When he turned, his expression was as controlled as it had been in the restaurant. Thank you for coming, he said, as if she'd had any real choice. Please, sit. He gestured to a cream sofa that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Arya perched on the edge of it, hands clasped in her lap, trying not to think about how out of place she looked in this pristine space. Dante sat across from her in a matching chair, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, evaluating, calculating. I have a proposition for you, he said without preamble. It's unconventional, but I believe it will be mutually beneficial. Before I explain, I need to know, can you keep a secret? Every instinct screamed danger. That depends on the secret. His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Fair. Let me rephrase. I'm about to offer you a significant sum of money in exchange for a service. The service requires absolute discretion. If you can't provide that, we'll end this conversation now. You'll keep the check from last night, and we'll never speak again. Arya's mouth was dry. What kind of service? The acting kind. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those dark eyes locked on hers. I need a wife, Miss Bennet, for 5 days, over Christmas, starting tomorrow. The words didn't make sense. She must have heard him wrong. A wife? A temporary wife, to attend my family's Christmas gathering. To play the role convincingly enough that no one questions it. His tone was businesslike, as if he were discussing a real estate transaction. In return, I'll pay you $300,000. The number hit her like a physical blow. $300,000, more money than her father had earned in years. Enough to pay every debt, start fresh, maybe even go back to school. Enough to build a life instead of just surviving. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why me? You could hire anyone, someone who actually knows how to be wealthy, who wouldn't... She gestured at herself, at her discount dress and her obvious poverty. Because you need the money, Dante said bluntly. Which means you'll take this seriously. And because no one in my family knows you, which means there's no risk of prior connection being discovered. He paused. And because last night, when you made a mistake that could have cost you everything, you didn't make excuses. You apologized and tried to fix it. That tells me you have integrity. Integrity, Arya repeated numbly. You want to pay me hundreds of thousands of dollars to lie to your family, and you think that requires integrity? I think it requires someone who will honor our agreement even when it becomes difficult. And it will become difficult, Miss Bennet. My family is... He seemed to search for the right word. Complicated. I don't understand why you need this. Surely you could just not bring someone. Or bring an actual girlfriend. I could, Dante agreed. But I have reasons for needing to appear married, and those reasons are my business. What matters for you is this: 5 days of playing a role, and you walk away with enough money to start over, completely. No more debt, no more struggling, no more working doubles just to make rent. He knew. Somehow, he knew exactly how bad things were for her. The realization should have been embarrassing, but instead it was almost a relief. No pretending, no maintaining the fiction that she was fine. There are conditions, Dante continued. Rules you must follow absolutely. First, you tell no one about this arrangement. Not friends, not family, not coworkers, no one. Second, you must be convincing. My family is perceptive. They'll look for cracks. You can't give them any. And third, Arya asked, because his pause suggested there was more. His expression darkened slightly. Third, and most important, you must never be alone with any man in my family. This is non-negotiable. If we're at the estate and a male relative approaches you when I'm not present, you find an excuse to leave immediately. You stay in public spaces, you stay near me or the women in the family, and you do not let yourself be isolated. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. That's a strange rule for a fake marriage. It's a necessary rule. His tone left no room for argument. My family has traditions, expectations. Some of my relatives don't respect boundaries the way they should. The rule is for your protection, Miss Bennet. Follow it, and you'll be fine. Break it, and I can't guarantee your safety. The casual way he said it, I can't guarantee your safety, sent ice down her spine. What kind of family are you from? The kind with money and power and very little oversight. He stood, walking to the windows, his hands in his pockets. I won't lie to you. This won't be a vacation. My family will test you, question you, look for any sign that you don't belong. You'll need to memorize details about our supposed relationship, learn about my business, my history, my preferences, become someone who could plausibly be my wife. In 5 days, Arya said faintly. We have today to prepare. The gathering starts tomorrow afternoon and runs through New Year's Day. 5 days total. He turned back to face her. I know this is a lot to absorb. Take a moment. Think it through. But I need your answer today. $300,000. freedom from debt, a chance to start over. All she had to do was pretend to be married to a stranger and spend Christmas with his apparently dangerous family while following rules designed to protect her from unspecified threats. It was insane. It was also the only lifeline she'd been thrown in 8 months of drowning. "If I say yes," Arya said slowly, "I want a contract, in writing, with the terms clearly spelled out." Dante smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his face from coldly handsome to something almost warm. "I already had one drawn up." He moved to a desk and returned with a folder. "Read it carefully. Take your time. If you have questions, ask them." The contract was surprisingly straightforward. 5 days of acting as Dante Morelli's wife during a private family gathering. Compensation of $300,000, paid in full upon successful completion. Confidentiality agreement with severe financial penalties for breach. And the rules? Tell no one, be convincing, and never be alone with male family members. There was also a clause that made her pause. Physical affection may be required to maintain the illusion of marriage. This may include hand-holding, brief embraces, and chaste kisses. Anything beyond this requires explicit consent from both parties. "I won't touch you without permission," Dante said quietly, watching her read. "But we may need to appear affectionate in public, holding hands, standing close, the occasional kiss on the cheek or forehead. Nothing more, unless you agree." Arya's hands were shaking again. She set the contract down on the coffee table, staring at it like it might bite. $300,000. 5 days. "Do you have a pen?" she heard herself ask. Dante handed her one, heavy, expensive, like everything else in this apartment. Arya took a breath, and then another. And then she signed her name on the line, her handwriting looking small and uncertain next to the official letterhead. When she looked up, Dante was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction at a deal well made. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. To Morelli," he said, and despite everything, the absurdity, the danger, the sheer insanity of what she'd just agreed to, Arya felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope. The ink was barely dry on the contract when Dante stood and gestured toward the dining room. "We should eat something, then we have a lot of work to do." The dining table could have seated 12 easily, but only 2 places were set at one end, close enough for conversation. A woman Arya hadn't noticed before, middle-aged, elegant, with steel-gray hair, emerged from what must have been the kitchen carrying covered dishes. "Miss Bennett, this is Maria," Dante said. "She manages the household. Maria, this is Arya. She'll be joining us for the next several days." Maria's eyes swept over Arya with the kind of assessment only another woman could deliver. Not unkind, but thorough. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded once. "Welcome. Lunch is ready. I'll bring coffee." The food was simple but perfect. Roasted chicken, winter vegetables, fresh bread that steamed when broken open. Arya realized she hadn't eaten since yesterday's half-shift meal at the restaurant. She forced herself to eat slowly, to use the correct fork, to not betray how foreign this kind of meal felt. Dante ate with efficient precision, his attention divided between his plate and his phone. "Tell me about yourself," he said without looking up. "Where you're from, your family, your education, everything." It felt invasive, but Arya supposed he had a right to know who he was paying $300,000 to. "I grew up in Queens. My mother left when I was 6. I don't remember her much. It was just me and my dad after that. He worked construction, did his best. I went to public school, got a scholarship to NYU for literature." "But you didn't finish." "No." The word came out flat. "He got sick my junior year. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Not nearly enough. I dropped out to work, to help with bills. He lasted 18 months, died in February." Dante finally looked up from his phone, and something in his expression had softened. "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry." Arya heard the bitterness in her voice and tried to soften it. "Sorry doesn't pay medical bills. Sorry doesn't bring him back." "No," Dante agreed quietly. "It doesn't. But for what it's worth, losing a parent is one of the few things that money can't fix. The grief is the same whether you're rich or poor." There was something in his tone that made Arya study him more carefully. You've lost someone. My mother, when I was 17. Car accident. He set his phone down, giving her his full attention. My father never recovered from it. He's still alive, technically, but he checked out years ago. Spends his days in his study drinking scotch and pretending the world doesn't exist. I'm sorry, Arya said, and meant it. Everyone's sorry, Dante echoed with a ghost of a smile. But you're right, it doesn't help much. He picked up his wine glass, studied the dark red liquid. Tell me about your father. What was he like? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her father in months. Most people avoided the topic like it was contagious. He was good. Not perfect, but good. He worked hard, laughed a lot, never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when he was exhausted. He taught me to play poker, told terrible jokes, believed I could do anything. Her throat tightened. He deserved better than dying in debt, worried about leaving me with nothing. He left you with plenty, Dante said. He left you with the kind of strength it takes to keep going when everything falls apart. That's worth more than money. You say that because you've always had money. Fair point, Dante acknowledged with a slight nod. But I've seen what happens to people who have everything material and nothing else. It's not pretty. Your father gave you something real. Hold on to that. They finished the meal in companionable silence. When Maria cleared the plates, Dante led Arya to a study lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook and a pen. Now we build your backstory, he said. My family will ask questions, lots of them. Your answers need to be consistent, detailed, and believable. So let's start with how we met. For the next 3 hours, they constructed an elaborate fiction. They'd met 6 months ago at a charity gala. Dante was there for business. Arya had been helping with the catering. He'd noticed her, struck up a conversation, been charmed by her intelligence and humor. They'd started dating quietly, keeping it private because Dante's family was intrusive, and he'd wanted to protect what they had. The relationship had progressed quickly, too quickly perhaps, but sometimes you just knew. They'd gotten married 3 weeks ago in a small civil ceremony, just the two of them and a judge. They'd planned to tell the family after the holidays, but Dante's grandfather had started making noise about wanting all the grandchildren together for Christmas, so they'd decided to break the news in person. Why the rush to marry? Arya asked. Won't they think that's suspicious? They'll think it's romantic, Dante said. My family has a history of whirlwind courtships. My grandfather proposed to my grandmother after knowing her for 2 weeks. My uncle Lorenzo married his wife after a month. It runs in the family, apparently. Okay, but why would I marry you? Arya gestured between them. You're wealthy, powerful, clearly out of my league. What's my motivation in this story? Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her. You fell in love. Sometimes that's enough. You saw past the money and the name to the person underneath. You make me laugh, make me think, make me want to be better than I am. And I make you feel safe, valued, cherished. All the things you haven't felt since your father died. The way he said it, calm and matter-of-fact, made it sound almost plausible. Arya found herself nodding. What about the physical side? If we've been married for 3 weeks, surely they'll expect us to be comfortable with each other. We'll need to practice, Dante agreed. Nothing inappropriate, but we should be able to stand close without tensing, hold hands without it looking forced, maintain eye contact without discomfort. He stood and held out his hand. Come here. Arya rose and crossed to him, hyper-aware of every step. When she was close enough to touch, Dante took her hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused in a way that surprised her. She'd expected the soft hands of someone who'd never done manual labor. Relax, he said quietly. I'm not going to hurt you. I know. But her shoulders were up around her ears, her spine rigid. Dante's other hand came up slowly, telegraphing his movement, and settled lightly on her waist. Breathe, Arya. We're just standing here. Nothing scary about that. She forced herself to breathe, to let her muscles unclench incrementally. This close, she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive. He was taller than her by nearly a foot, broad-shouldered and solid in a way that should have been intimidating but somehow wasn't. Better, Dante murmured. Now look at me like you love me. I don't know how to do that on command. Think about your father. Think about how you felt when he smiled at you, when he was proud of you. That kind of warmth. Can you do that? Arya let the memories surface. Her father's face when she'd brought home straight A's, when she'd been accepted to NYU, when she'd read him her first short story, the way his eyes had crinkled at the corners, full of uncomplicated love and pride. She let that feeling fill her chest and show in her expression as she looked up at Dante. His breath caught almost imperceptibly. "Perfect," he said. "That's exactly right. Hold that thought. If you can look at me like that in front of my family, they'll never doubt this is real." They practiced for another hour, walking side by side with his arm around her waist, sitting together on the sofa with her hand in his, him pressing a kiss to her temple while she leaned into his shoulder. It was awkward at first, their bodies uncertain of where to be and how to move, but gradually they found a rhythm. Dante was patient, careful to ask before touching her anywhere new, always giving her space to refuse. "You're very good at this," Arya said during a break. "The touching without being creepy part. Most men aren't." "Most men are idiots," Dante replied. "Consent isn't complicated. You ask, you listen, you respect the answer. It's not difficult." He checked his watch. "We should talk about the family. You need to know who you're dealing with." He pulled up photos on his phone, walking her through a gallery of faces. "This is my grandfather, Lorenzo Morelli. 83, sharp as a knife, still runs the family business even though he's supposedly retired. He's the one you need to impress most. If he accepts you, everyone else will fall in line." The man in the photo had white hair and fierce eyes, his jaw set in a way that suggested he'd never back down from anything in his life. "What's the family business?" Arya asked. "Real estate development, hotels, commercial properties, residential buildings. We own a significant portion of Manhattan's skyline." Dante swiped to the next photo. "This is my father, Antonio. You probably won't interact with him much. He keeps to himself. But be respectful if you do." Antonio Morelli looked like an older, more weathered version of Dante, but with none of the intensity. His eyes were distant, haunted. "My uncle Lorenzo, yes, same name as my grandfather. It's an Italian thing. And his wife Francesca. They have 3 kids all around our age. Lorenzo Jr., who goes by Enzo, is a lawyer. Gabriella works in fashion, and Marco—" Dante's voice hardened slightly. "Marco is the one you need to watch out for." The photo showed a man who looked startlingly like Dante. Same dark eyes, same sharp features, but with something cruel in his smile. "What's wrong with Marco?" "He doesn't understand boundaries. Thinks his charm and the family name mean he can do whatever he wants. He's been in trouble before. Situations with women that the family's money and lawyers made disappear." Dante's jaw tightened. "This is why the rule exists, Arya. Marco is the primary reason you can never be alone with any of them. He's dangerous, and he doesn't take no for an answer." Fear crawled up Arya's spine. "Why is he allowed to come to family gatherings if he's like that?" "Because he's family. Because my grandfather believes blood is everything. Because the Morelli family closes ranks and protects its own, even when its own don't deserve protecting." Dante met her eyes. "I will keep you safe from him, but you have to follow the rules. Promise me." "I promise," Arya said, and meant it. They continued through the family tree. Aunt Francesca was kind but nosy, prone to asking invasive questions. Enzo was ambitious and calculating, always looking for angles. Gabriella was sweet but shallow, obsessed with designer labels and social media. There were other relatives too, distant cousins, family friends who might as well be blood, hangers-on who orbited the Morelli money. "It's a lot to remember," Arya said, rubbing her temples. "You'll meet them gradually. Just remember the key players. Grandfather Lorenzo, Marco, and Francesca. Handle them, and you'll be fine." Dante stood, stretching. "You should go home, get some rest. We leave for the estate at noon tomorrow. Pack for 5 days, but pack nice. My family will judge you based on your clothes." Arya thought of her closet at home, the handful of worn pieces that constituted her entire wardrobe. "I don't have anything nice enough for your family." "I assumed as much." Dante walked to the desk and pulled out a credit card, holding it out to her. "Buy what you need, within reason." She stared at the card like it might bite. "I can't just take your credit card." "You can and you will. Consider it part of the job. You can't play the role if you don't look the part." When she still didn't take it, he sighed. "Arya, this isn't charity. This is a business expense. I need you to be convincing, which means I need you to look like someone who could plausibly be my wife. Take the card. Buy clothes. Get your hair done if you want. Whatever you need to feel confident. Slowly, Arya reached out and took the card. It was heavy, metal, with his name embossed in silver. The kind of card that had no limit, no restrictions. Thank you. Maria will give you her number. If you need help shopping or don't know where to go, call her. She'll point you in the right direction. Dante walked her to the elevator. Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow is going to be intense. The elevator doors were closing when Arya called out, Dante? He caught the doors, holding them open. Yes? Why are you really doing this? The fake marriage. What's worth $300,000 and all this preparation? For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he said, My grandfather is dying. Cancer. He has maybe 6 months, probably less. His dying wish is to see all his grandchildren settled and happy before he goes. I'm the oldest, and I'm unmarried, which means I'm a disappointment. This Christmas gathering is his last one. I want to give him peace. The simple honesty of it hit Arya square in the chest. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry, Dante said with a sad smile. But you're going to help me give him something better than sympathy. You're going to help me give him closure. See you tomorrow, Arya. The doors closed, and Arya rode down in silence, turning the credit card over in her hands and thinking about dying grandfathers and desperate lies told out of love. The next morning, Arya stood in her apartment surrounded by shopping bags and wondered if she'd lost her mind. She'd spent hours in stores she'd only ever walked past before, trying on clothes that cost more than her monthly rent, guided by Maria's patient advice over the phone. Now her bed was covered in tissue paper and designer labels, cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, tailored pants, a cocktail dress that made her look like someone else entirely. Maria had insisted on the essentials too. Good luggage to replace Arya's battered duffel, new shoes that actually fit properly, a coat that would stand up to the upstate New York winter without making her look like she was drowning in secondhand polyester. There was also the ring. Dante had messaged her last night. Need wedding rings? Maria will take you tomorrow morning. They'd met at a jewelry store in Midtown, the kind with a buzzer on the door and guards who looked like they could bench press a car. The sales associate had brought out trays of rings, each one sparkling under the lights, each one costing more than Arya had made in her entire life. That one, Maria had said, pointing to a simple platinum band with a single diamond, substantial but not ostentatious. It suits you. When Arya had tried to ask the price, Maria had just shaken her head. Don't worry about it. Mr. Morelli said to get what's appropriate. Now the ring sat on Arya's finger, foreign and heavy. She kept catching herself staring at it, watching how the light caught the diamond. It was beautiful. It was also a lie. Her phone buzzed. Dante. Car's downstairs, ready? No, Arya thought. But she texted back, be right down, and started loading her new luggage with her new clothes, and wondered who the hell she was pretending to be. The drive north took 3 hours, the city gradually giving way to suburbs and then to the rolling hills of the Hudson Valley. Snow had fallen overnight, covering everything in pristine white. Dante sat beside her in the back of the town car, working on his laptop, occasionally pointing out landmarks or asking her to recite details of their fabricated relationship. Where did I propose? He asked without looking up from his screen. The Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. You said you wanted to ask me somewhere that showed the whole city because our love story belonged to New York. Favorite restaurant? That little Italian place in the West Village, Piccolo Angelo. You took me there on our 3rd date. What do I drink? Water mostly. Sometimes wine with dinner, but you're not a big drinker. You said you like to stay in control. Dante finally looked at her, approval in his eyes. Good. You're a quick study. I had a good teacher. Arya watched the landscape roll past. Are you nervous? About my family meeting you? Moderately. They're going to be skeptical. I don't blame them. I've never brought anyone to a family gathering before, and suddenly I show up married to a woman they've never heard of. They'll have questions. What if I mess up? What if I forget something or say the wrong thing? Then we'll handle it. Just stay calm, stick to the story, and remember, you love me. Everything else flows from that. He reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. We're in this together now. I won't let you fail. The estate appeared like something from a dream or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. A massive stone mansion set back from the road, surrounded by acres of snow-covered grounds. The driveway seemed to go on forever, lined with bare trees that looked like skeletal sentries. "Welcome to the Morelli family compound," Dante said dryly, "where Christmas comes to die." Despite herself, Arya laughed. "It's beautiful. It's oppressive, but yes, I suppose it has its moments." The car pulled up to the front entrance, where other vehicles were already parked. "Ready to meet everyone?" Arya's heart was hammering. "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." But Dante squeezed her hand gently. "Remember, you belong here because I say you do. Don't let anyone make you feel less than. You're my wife. Act like it." The front door opened before they could knock. A woman in her 50s with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes stood in the doorway. "Dante," she said, kissing both his cheeks, "how wonderful to see you. And this must be—" "Arya," Dante said, his arm sliding around her waist and pulling her close. "My wife. Arya, this is my Aunt Francesca." Francesca's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of her shock. Then the smile stretched wider, more brittle. "Your wife. How surprising. And wonderful, of course. Come in, everyone is dying to meet you." The entrance hall was all marble and crystal, with a Christmas tree that had to be 20 feet tall dominating the space. The smell of pine and cinnamon filled the air, along with the sound of voices coming from deeper in the house. "Lorenzo!" Francesca called out. "Dante's here, and he's brought someone." Footsteps. And then the man from the photos appeared. Lorenzo Morelli, the grandfather, the patriarch, the man Dante was doing all this to please. He was shorter than Arya had expected, but he carried himself like a giant, his white hair swept back, his dark eyes missing nothing. "Nonno," Dante said, respect clear in his voice. "I'd like you to meet someone very important to me. This is Arya Bennett, my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Lorenzo stood very still, his gaze moving from Dante to Arya and back again. Arya's hand found Dante's and gripped tight, trying to draw courage from his solid presence beside her. Then Lorenzo smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and stepped forward with his arms outstretched. "A wife!" he exclaimed. "Finally, my grandson brings me a wife." He pulled Arya into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and peppermint. "Welcome, welcome to the family, my dear. Let me look at you." He held her at arm's length, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. But she held still, kept her expression open and warm, channeled every acting skill she'd never known she had. "Beautiful," Lorenzo pronounced. "And those eyes, sharp, intelligent, good. My Dante needs a woman who can keep up with him." He turned to his grandson. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" 3 weeks ago, Dante said smoothly. "Small ceremony, just us and a judge. We wanted to keep it private for a while, but when you said you wanted everyone together for Christmas, we decided it was time to share the news." 3 weeks! Francesca's voice was shrill. "Dante, you've known this girl for what, 6 months? And you married her without telling anyone." 7 months, Arya corrected softly, remembering the timeline they'd constructed. "We met in May, at the Children's Hospital Gala." Francesca's eyes narrowed. "You work in healthcare?" "I was helping with the catering, actually. I'm a waitress." The lie was mostly truth, which made it easier to sell. "Dante spilled wine on his jacket, and I helped him get the stain out. We started talking, and—" She looked up at Dante, channeling warmth and affection. "We couldn't stop." "How romantic," Lorenzo said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Love knows no class, no boundaries. My own Sophia was the daughter of a baker when I met her. Her father thought I was trouble." He chuckled at the memory. "He was right, but she married me anyway. 57 years we had together." "Where's everyone else?" Dante asked, changing the subject smoothly. "The cousins are in the library," Francesca said, still eyeing Arya with suspicion. "Antonio is in his study. The rest of the family will arrive tomorrow. For tonight, it's just us." She linked her arm through Lorenzo's. "Come, let's get you two settled. We have so many questions." They were led through the mansion, past rooms that looked like museum displays, furniture that was more art than comfort, paintings worth fortunes, every surface gleaming. Arya tried not to gape like a tourist, but it was overwhelming. This was where Dante had grown up, this opulent, pristine, suffocating place. The library was smaller than Arya expected, but still impressive, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a fire crackling in a stone fireplace. 3 people looked up as they entered, 2 men and a woman, all around Dante's age. "Well, well," one of the men said, standing. He was handsome in a sharp-edged way, his suit perfectly tailored. Little Dante finally joins the party. And who's this? Enzo, Gabriella, Marco, meet Arya, my wife. The silence this time was even heavier. Gabriella's mouth fell open. Enzo's eyebrows rose toward his hairline. And Marco's dark eyes fixed on Arya with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Wife," Marco repeated slowly. He crossed the room, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "Well, congratulations, cousin." He reached for Arya's hand, and she had no choice but to offer it. Instead of shaking it, he brought it to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lucky man." Dante's hand came down on Marco's shoulder, not quite gentle. "Very lucky, luckiest man alive." His tone was light, but there was steel underneath. "Arya, you must be tired from the drive. Let's get you settled in our room." "Of course," Arya said quickly, grateful for the escape. "It was nice to meet you all." As they left the library, she could feel Marco's eyes following them, and she understood viscerally why Dante had been so insistent about the rules. There was something predatory in the way Marco looked at her, like she was a puzzle he intended to solve or a prize he intended to win. Their room was in the East Wing, a suite that was larger than Arya's entire apartment, king-size bed with pristine white linens, a sitting area with a fireplace, windows overlooking the snowy grounds, a bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. "We're sharing a room," Arya said, stating the obvious. "We're married," Dante replied. "Separate rooms would raise questions. Don't worry, I'll sleep on the sofa. It's comfortable enough." "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do. This is business, Arya, professional. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable." He set his bag on the luggage rack. "How are you holding up?" "Your cousin is creepy." "I warned you." Warning and experiencing are different things. Arya sank onto the edge of the bed. He looked at me like, I don't know, like I was something he wanted to take apart. Dante's expression darkened. "Stay away from him. I mean it. If he approaches you and I'm not there, find an excuse to leave. Go to the bathroom, claim you need air, anything. Do not let him corner you." "You really think he'd try something with his whole family here?" "I think Marco believes rules don't apply to him, and I think my family has a history of looking the other way when he crosses lines." Dante crouched in front of her, taking both her hands. "I will keep you safe. That's a promise. But you have to help me by being careful." Arya nodded, squeezing his hands. "Okay, I'll be careful." A knock at the door interrupted them. Francesca's voice called out, "Dinner in 30 minutes. Don't be late." The next 5 days stretched ahead like a minefield, and Arya had just taken her first step into dangerous territory. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have hosted a state banquet. The table stretched endlessly under a chandelier dripping with crystals, each place setting worth more than Arya had earned in a month of double shifts. She counted 14 people as they filtered in, family members and close associates, all dressed like they were attending an opera rather than a casual family meal. Dante kept her close, his hand at the small of her back as he guided her to seats near the head of the table, where Lorenzo presided like a benevolent king. Arya found herself positioned between Dante and Gabriella, who eyed her with undisguised curiosity. "So, Arya," Gabriella said as servers began bringing out the first course, "Dante says you're a waitress. Where do you work?" "Luminaire," Arya replied, grateful they'd kept this detail truthful. "In Manhattan." Gabriella's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "That's a Michelin star restaurant. They must pay well." The implication hung in the air. How could a waitress afford to marry into the Morelli family, if not for the money? Arya felt heat crawl up her neck, but Dante's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "The pay is adequate," Arya said carefully. "But I didn't marry Dante for his money. I married him because I love him." "Of course you did," Francesca chimed in from across the table, her smile sharp as glass. "But you must admit, The financial security doesn't hurt. Going from serving tables to being a Morelli, that's quite the upgrade. Francesca, Lorenzo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's enough. The girl is family now. We welcome her with open arms, not interrogation. But the damage was done. Arya could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her from all sides. These people had decided who she was the moment they learned she was a waitress, a gold digger, an opportunist, someone trying to climb a social ladder she had no business being on. Tell us how Dante proposed, Gabriella pressed, apparently oblivious to the undercurrents. Was it romantic? Arya glanced at Dante, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They'd rehearsed this. It was sunset on the Brooklyn Bridge. We were walking, and Dante just stopped in the middle and said he didn't want to wait anymore. He said he'd been carrying the ring for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, but he realized there was no such thing. The perfect moment was just being with me. She watched Dante as she spoke, letting the fabricated memory play out in her mind, making it real enough to sell. He got down on one knee right there, with people walking past and the city lights coming on, and he asked me to marry him. I started crying before he even finished the question. How romantic, Gabriella sighed. Enzo, when you finally propose to someone, it better be that thoughtful. Enzo snorted. When I propose, it'll be after a proper courtship, not some whirlwind romance where you barely know the person. Sophia and I knew each other for 6 weeks before we married, Lorenzo interjected, his voice carrying the weight of memory. When you know, you know. Age doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. All that matters is the connection between two souls. Arya felt a pang of guilt at the old man's romantic words. He believed in love, in destiny, in the kind of epic romance that transcended practicality. And here she was, lying to his face, part of an elaborate deception designed to give him peace in his final months. Nono is right, Marco said, speaking for the first time since they'd sat down. He was positioned directly across from Arya, and she'd been acutely aware of his gaze throughout the meal. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know they're meant to be yours. You can feel it in your bones, this certainty that fate brought you together. The way he looked at her when he said it made Arya's skin crawl. Dante's hand tightened on hers, a silent warning. Arya and I were lucky to find each other, Dante said smoothly. Not everyone gets that kind of chance. The conversation shifted to business, real estate deals, market trends, political connections that meant nothing to Arya, but seemed to animate the men at the table. She picked at her food, each course more elaborate than the last, trying not to think about how many shifts she would have had to work to afford a meal like this. Halfway through the main course, Lorenzo tapped his wine glass for attention. I want to make a toast, he announced, rising slowly from his chair. Everyone fell silent, glasses raised. To my grandson Dante, who has finally found a woman brave enough to put up with him, and to Arya, who is now part of this family, whether she likes it or not. Laughter rippled around the table. Lorenzo's eyes found Arya's, and there was something in them, warmth, but also assessment. We Morellis are not an easy family to marry into. We have our traditions, our expectations, our complicated history, but we are loyal to our own. Welcome, my dear. May you bring Dante the happiness he deserves. Everyone drank. Arya brought the wine to her lips, tasting the expensive vintage, and wondering if Lorenzo suspected the truth. He was sharp, Dante had said. Sharp enough to build an empire, sharp enough to see through convenient lies. After dinner, the family gathered in a vast living room where another Christmas tree stood, this one decorated with what looked like vintage ornaments and white lights. Coffee and dessert were served, and Arya found herself sitting on a sofa with Gabriella, who seemed determined to befriend her. I know Francesca came on strong, Gabriella said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. She means well. She's just protective of Dante. We all are. He's been alone for so long, throwing himself into work, never letting anyone get close. When he announced he was married, we were all shocked. I understand, Arya said. If my cousin suddenly showed up married to a stranger, I'd have questions too. You have cousins? No, only child. It was just me and my dad. Was? Gabriella's expression softened. He's passed? Earlier this year. The grief was still fresh enough to make Arya's throat tighten. Cancer. I'm so sorry. Gabriella touched her arm gently. That must have been terrible. At least you have Dante now. He's a good man. Serious, maybe a little intense, but good. He'll take care of you. Across the room, Arya could see Dante deep in conversation with his grandfather, their heads bent close together. Whatever they were discussing looked serious, and she wondered if Lorenzo was asking the questions that really mattered, the ones that could unravel their entire charade. Can I give you some advice? Gabriella leaned in conspiratorially. Watch out for Marco. He's charming, but he's trouble. He has a history of, let's just say he doesn't always respect boundaries, especially with women. Dante warned me, Arya admitted. Good. Marco sees marriage as a challenge rather than a boundary. He's tried to seduce half the wives in this family. Don't be alone with him. Gabriella's usual airheaded demeanor had vanished, replaced by genuine concern. I mean it. He's dangerous. Before Arya could respond, Marco himself appeared, dropping into the chair across from them, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ladies, what are we gossiping about? Your terrible personality, Gabriella said sweetly. We were just discussing what a disappointment you are to the family. Gabriella, you wound me. Marco pressed a hand to his chest in mock hurt, but his attention was fixed on Arya. I hope my cousin is treating you well. Dante can be quite demanding, very specific about how things should be done. He's wonderful, Arya said firmly. I couldn't ask for a better husband. Newlywed bliss. How precious. Marco leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me, Arya, what does a waitress talk about with a man like Dante? Don't you find the cultural gap challenging? The condescension in his tone was barely veiled. Arya felt anger spark in her chest, hot and bright. We talk about books, she said evenly. Philosophy, history, art. Turns out you don't need money to have interesting thoughts. Marco's smile widened, showing teeth. Touché. A waitress with fire. I can see why Dante was intrigued. Marco. Dante's voice cut across the room like a whip. He was standing now, his grandfather beside him. Leave her alone. We're just getting acquainted, Marco protested, spreading his hands innocently. Surely you don't mind me talking to my new cousin. I mind you cornering her. Dante crossed the room in quick strides, positioning himself between Marco and Arya. Come on, darling, Nono wants to show us something. Arya rose gratefully, taking Dante's offered hand. As they walked away, she felt Marco's eyes tracking them, and she suppressed a shiver. Lorenzo led them to a smaller room off the main living area, a study lined with photographs and memorabilia. He gestured to a black and white photo of a young couple on their wedding day, the woman in white lace and the man in a sharp suit, both beaming at the camera. My Sophia, Lorenzo said softly, touching the frame. That was our wedding day. December 23rd, 1968. She was 19, I was 21. Her father nearly killed me when I asked for her hand. Said I was trouble, said I'd break her heart. He chuckled, but there was sadness in it. He was half right. I was trouble, but I loved her until the day she died, and I'll love her until I follow. Arya felt tears prick her eyes at the raw emotion in his voice. This was real love, the kind that lasted decades, the kind that survived everything. Not the fiction she and Dante were selling. She was beautiful, Arya said honestly. She was everything. Lorenzo turned to face them. I'm dying, you know. The doctors give me maybe 6 months. Cancer, spreading faster than they can treat it. He held up a hand when Dante started to protest. Don't. I've made my peace with it. I've had a good life, built something that will outlast me. But I wanted to see my grandchildren settled before I go. Wanted to know they'd have love in their lives, not just money and power. He studied Arya with those sharp eyes. You love my grandson? The question was direct, demanding honesty. Arya thought about the easy lie, the practiced response. But something in Lorenzo's gaze made her want to give him truth, or at least as close to truth as she could manage. I care about him deeply, she said carefully. He's been good to me when he didn't have to be. He makes me feel safe in a world that hasn't felt very safe lately. I want to make him happy. It wasn't quite love, but it wasn't quite a lie either. In the brief time she'd known Dante, he had been kind, respectful, protective. She did care what happened to him, did want him to find happiness. Lorenzo nodded slowly. Good enough. Love grows if you nurture it. My Sophia didn't love me at first. She thought I was arrogant and rude. But I won her over, day by day, choice by choice. You have that potential, I think. Both of you. He turned to Dante. Don't mess this up, boy. Good women are rare. I know, no, Dante said quietly. I won't. After they left Lorenzo's study, Dante guided Arya toward the grand staircase. You handled that well, he murmured. He liked you. That's half the battle won. He suspects something, Arya said. I could see it in his eyes. He's too smart not to question this. Suspecting and proving are different things. As long as we're consistent, we'll be fine. They reached their room, and Dante locked the door behind them with audible relief. Day 1 down, 4 more to go. Arya sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over her. Your family is exhausting. Tell me about it. I've had 32 years of practice and they still wear me out. Dante shrugged off his jacket, loosening his tie. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow more family arrives, which means more scrutiny. We need to be sharp. But sleep proved elusive. Arya lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, while Dante settled on the sofa across the room. The events of the day played on repeat in her mind. Francesca's cutting remarks, Gabriella's genuine warmth, Marco's predatory attention, Lorenzo's piercing questions. Dante? She whispered into the darkness. Yes? What happens if we fail? If they figure out this is fake? Silence stretched for a long moment. Then Dante's voice came, quiet but firm. We won't fail. We can't. Too much is riding on this. For you, maybe. I just lose the money. No. The sofa creaked as Dante sat up. If this fails, if my family finds out I lied to them about something this important, the consequences go beyond money. My grandfather's last memory of me will be betrayal. My family will never trust me again. And you'll be caught in the crossfire. The woman who helped me lie, who took money to deceive a dying man. They're powerful, Arya, and they hold grudges. Your life could become very difficult very quickly. The weight of what she'd agreed to settled over Arya like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about playing a role for 5 days. This was about deceiving people who had the resources to make her regret it if they found out. I'm sorry, Dante said after a moment. I shouldn't have laid that on you. You're already under enough pressure. No, I needed to hear it. I needed to understand what's really at stake. Arya pulled the covers up to her chin. We'll make this work. We have to. The next day dawned cold and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows and painting everything in shades of white and gold. Arya woke to find Dante already up, showered and dressed, sitting in the chair by the window with his laptop. Morning, he said, glancing up. Breakfast is at 9. The rest of the family arrives around noon. Arya checked her phone. 8:50. She had just enough time to make herself presentable. The shower was a revelation. Hot water that never ran out, pressure that actually worked, expensive soaps that smelled like heaven. She emerged feeling almost human, wrapped in a plush robe that probably cost more than her entire bathroom at home. Dante had laid out clothes on the bed while she showered, the cashmere sweater and tailored pants they'd picked out together, tasteful pearl earrings that Maria had insisted were essential. Arya dressed carefully, checking her reflection and barely recognizing the woman who looked back. With the right clothes and the right setting, she could almost pass for someone who belonged in this world. Breakfast was served in a sun-drenched conservatory, all glass walls and tropical plants. Lorenzo was already there, reading a newspaper, along with Enzo and a few people Arya hadn't met yet. Dante made introductions. Distant cousins, family friends, hangers-on, whose exact relationship to the Morellis was unclear. Sleep well? Lorenzo asked as they sat down with plates of eggs and fresh pastries. Very well, thank you, Arya said. The lie came easier now. The room is beautiful. That was Dante's room when he was a boy. We renovated it a few years ago, but I thought he'd appreciate staying in familiar territory. Lorenzo sipped his espresso. Tell me, Arya, what are your plans now that you're a married woman? Will you continue working? The question was a minefield. Arya glanced at Dante, who gave her a slight nod. Your call. I haven't decided yet, she said honestly. I love the work, love the restaurant, but I also want to support Dante in whatever he needs. We're still figuring out how to balance everything. A wise answer. Marriage is about compromise, about finding ways to honor both partners' needs. Lorenzo set down his cup. My Sophia never worked outside the home, but she was the power behind everything I built. Her judgment, her insight, I trusted it more than my own. A true partner is worth more than any business deal. The words stung because they were so sincere. Lorenzo believed in marriage, in partnership, in the kind of love that built empires together, and she was helping Dante lie to him about having found exactly that. The morning passed in a blur of small talk and polite conversation. More family members trickled in, each one requiring introductions and explanations. Arya's cheeks hurt from smiling, her mind spinning as she tried to keep track of names and relationships. Around noon, the house erupted in commotion as cars pulled up the long driveway. Arya watched from the window as people emerged. More cousins, their children, elderly relatives helped along by younger hands. The Morelli family was gathering in full force. "Here we go," Dante murmured beside her. "The real test begins." They joined the chaos in the entrance hall, where Lorenzo was greeting everyone with hugs and exclamations. Dante's father Antonio appeared briefly, shook hands with a few people with dead eyes, then retreated back to his study. Francesca was in her element, directing staff and organizing the mob of relatives with military precision. "Dante!" A woman in her 60s rushed forward, pulling him into an embrace. "My beautiful boy, and this must be the mystery wife everyone's talking about." "Aunt Teresa," Dante said with genuine warmth. "This is Arya. Arya, my mother's sister." Teresa pulled Arya into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and peppermint. "Welcome, welcome. I can't believe Dante got married without inviting me. I practically raised this boy after Maria passed." "It was very sudden," Arya said, returning the hug. "We didn't want a big fuss." "Nonsense. Weddings should always be a big fuss. But what's done is done. We'll just have to throw you a proper reception when all this holiday madness is over." Teresa stood back, assessing Arya with kind eyes. "You're lovely. Good. Dante needs someone lovely to balance out his seriousness." The afternoon dissolved into organized chaos. Children ran shrieking through the halls. Adults clustered in groups, drinking and talking too loud. Someone started playing Christmas music on the grand piano in the music room. The house that had felt like a museum yesterday was suddenly alive, pulsing with the messy reality of family. Dante kept Arya close, his hand always at her back or holding hers, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this. They moved through the crowd together, telling their story over and over until it started to feel almost real. But Marco was always there, lurking at the edges of her vision. She'd turn and find him watching her from across the room. She'd laugh at something someone said, and catch him smiling at her in a way that made her skin crawl. He never approached directly, never gave Dante cause to intervene, but his presence was a constant pressure. Late in the afternoon, Arya excused herself to use the bathroom. She'd memorized the layout of the ground floor, knew the nearest powder room was just down the hall from the main living area. She slipped away from the crowd, grateful for a moment of peace. The hallway was blissfully quiet, muffling the noise from the party. Arya found the bathroom and locked herself inside, leaning against the sink and taking deep breaths. Just 2 more days after this one. She could do this. She had to do this. When she emerged, Marco was waiting in the hallway. Arya's heart jumped into her throat. They were alone. The party sounds distant, no one in sight. She thought about Dante's warnings, Gabriella's concern, the rules she'd promised to follow. "Excuse me," she said, moving to step around him. Marco shifted, blocking her path. "No need to rush off. I wanted a chance to talk to you properly, without my cousin hovering." "Dante doesn't hover. He's attentive." Arya tried to keep her voice steady, casual. "Now, if you'll excuse me, you know what I think?" Marco took a step closer, and Arya took a step back, her shoulders hitting the wall. "I think this whole thing is bullshit. You and Dante, this sudden marriage. Something doesn't add up." "I don't care what you think," Arya said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Now move." "Or what? You'll tell Dante I talked to you? We're family, sweetheart. We're allowed to talk." His eyes raked over her, assessing. "You're pretty. I'll give you that. But you're not Dante's type. He likes sophisticated women, educated women, women who understand his world, not waitresses playing dress-up." The words hit their mark, echoing all of Arya's own insecurities. But she lifted her chin, met his gaze squarely. You don't know anything about what Dante likes. Now get out of my way or I'll scream loud enough to bring this entire party running. Marco laughed, but he stepped aside. Relax. I'm just getting to know my new cousin. But here's some free advice. This family eats people like you for breakfast. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you're going to get out of this, it won't work. We protect our own, and you're not one of us. You'll never be one of us. He walked away, leaving Arya shaking against the wall. She waited until her breathing steadied, until the trembling in her hands subsided, then made her way back to the party on unsteady legs. Dante found her immediately, his eyes scanning her face with concern. What's wrong? Nothing, Arya lied. Just tired. Too many people. But Dante's jaw tightened, and she knew he didn't believe her. He pulled her into a quiet corner, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Did something happen? Did someone say something to you? Arya thought about telling him, about describing the encounter with Marco. But what would that accomplish? Dante would confront his cousin, there would be drama, and Marco would just be more careful next time. Better to handle it herself, to stay vigilant, to make sure she was never alone again. I'm fine, she said, forcing a smile. Really? Just overwhelmed. This is a lot of family. Dante studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me. Immediately. That's not negotiable. I will, I promise. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Dinner was another elaborate affair, this time with 20 people crowded around the extended table. Arya found herself seated between Teresa and an elderly cousin who was mostly deaf and kept asking her to repeat herself. Across the table, Marco watched her with that unsettling smile, and she made sure to keep her eyes on her plate or on Dante, never giving him an opening. After dinner, Lorenzo stood again, this time with visible effort. The room fell silent immediately, all attention on the patriarch. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, he said, his voice carrying despite its frailty. This will be my last Christmas with all of you. The doctors have given me my timeline, and I'm at peace with it. But I wanted to gather you all here, wanted to see my family together one final time. Protests erupted around the table, but Lorenzo waved them away. No, we don't pretend anymore. I'm dying, and that's all right. I've lived a good life, built something that will outlast me. But more importantly, I've loved and been loved. That's what matters in the end. His gaze swept the table, landing on each grandchild in turn, finally settling on Dante and Arya. Some of you have found your partners, started building your own families. Others are still searching, but I see hope in all of you. I see the Morelli strength, the Morelli determination. Whatever comes next, you'll face it together. Family is everything, remember that. The weight of his words pressed down on Arya like a physical thing. This man was dying, and his last wish was to see his family happy and settled. And she was helping Dante lie to him, helping create an illusion of happiness that would crumble the moment this charade ended. Later, lying in bed while Dante pretended to sleep on the sofa, Arya stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of person she was becoming. The kind who could lie to a dying man for money. The kind who could smile and play pretend while someone's final Christmas unfolded around her. The kind who could feel Marco's eyes on her and say nothing, because speaking up would complicate the deception. I can hear you thinking, Dante's voice came from across the room. Can't sleep. Neither can I. The sofa creaked as he shifted. Want to talk about it? No, yes, I don't know. Arya sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. Your grandfather is dying, and we're lying to him. Doesn't that bother you? Silence. Then Dante rose, crossing to sit on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. Every single day, he said quietly. Every time he looks at us with hope in his eyes, every time he talks about love and family, I feel like the worst kind of person. Then why are we doing this? Because the alternative is worse. Because if I told him the truth, that I'm so broken and closed off, that I couldn't find someone to love me, that I'm going to die alone like my father, that the Morelli legacy of love stops with me, it would break his heart. This lie gives him peace. Sometimes peace is worth the price. What about after? Arya asked. After he's gone, and we're supposed to be married, and your family expects to see us together? We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll say it didn't work out, get a quiet divorce. People will talk, But people always talk. The important thing is that Nono dies believing I found what he had with Sophia, that I'm not alone. Arya looked at him in the dim light filtering through the windows. His face was shadowed, drawn with exhaustion and something deeper. Loneliness, maybe. Or grief for a grandfather not yet gone. Are you alone, Dante? Is that why this was so easy for you to arrange? Because there's no one in your life who would question a sudden marriage. Yes, he said simply. I work 80 hours a week building things, making deals, expanding the empire. I come home to an empty apartment. I eat alone, sleep alone, wake up alone. And I tell myself it's fine, that I don't need anyone, that relationships are messy and complicated and not worth the effort. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it's easier to hire a wife than to risk actually letting someone in. The honesty caught Arya off guard. She'd expected deflection, expected the smooth businessman who always had an answer. Instead, she got raw truth, and she found herself responding in kind. I get it. After my dad died, I shut down too. Easier to just survive than to feel anything. Easier to work myself to exhaustion than to face how alone I am. She hesitated, then added, maybe we're not so different after all. Two broken people pretending to be whole. Dante met her eyes in the darkness. Maybe that's why this works. We understand each other's damage. Is that enough? To make this convincing? I think it might be. He stood, moving back toward the sofa. Get some sleep, Arya. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. The hardest day is still ahead. Christmas Eve morning arrived with fresh snow falling outside the windows, transforming the estate into something from a winter fairy tale. Arya woke to find Dante already gone, a note on the bedside table in his precise handwriting. Family breakfast at 8, traditional Morelli Christmas Eve, expect chaos, stay close to me today. The warning in those last 4 words made her stomach clench. She dressed carefully in a deep green sweater dress that Maria had insisted was perfect for the occasion, adding the pearl earrings and the wedding ring that still felt foreign on her finger. Her reflection looked composed, confident, nothing like the terrified girl who'd signed a contract 3 days ago. The breakfast room was already packed when she arrived. Children ran between the adults, high on sugar and Christmas excitement. The smell of fresh pastries and strong coffee filled the air, along with the sound of rapid Italian being shouted across the table. Arya hesitated in the doorway, suddenly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of family. There she is. Teresa spotted her immediately and waved her over. Come, sit by me. Dante's been looking for you. As if summoned, Dante appeared at her elbow, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that was becoming familiar. Morning, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple that looked natural, effortless. Sleep okay? Better than expected, Arya said, surprised to find it was true. The conversation last night had shifted something between them, created a fragile understanding that felt almost like friendship. They filled plates from the buffet, eggs, pastries, fresh fruit, more food than any reasonable group could consume. Arya found herself wedged between Dante and one of the younger cousins, a woman named Lucia, who worked as a doctor in Boston and peppered her with friendly questions about wedding plans and honeymoon destinations. We haven't had time to plan anything yet, Arya said, spreading jam on a croissant. Everything happened so fast. That's romance for you, Lucia said with a knowing smile. My husband and I eloped to Vegas, drove my parents crazy, but 20 years later, we're still happy. Sometimes the best decisions are the impulsive ones. Across the table, Francesca was watching them with narrowed eyes, her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Arya met her gaze steadily, refusing to be the first to look away. Finally, Francesca set down her cup and turned to speak to Enzo, but the message was clear. She was still suspicious, still watching. After breakfast, Lorenzo announced that the family would be decorating the main Christmas tree together, a tradition that apparently dated back generations. Everyone gathered in the grand entrance hall, where a massive fir stood bare and waiting, boxes of ornaments stacked around its base. Every family member adds one ornament, Lorenzo explained, his voice carrying despite its frailty. He was seated in a high-backed chair that looked almost like a throne, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth of the house. Something that represents who you are, what matters to you. The tree becomes a history of the family, each year adding to the story. One by one, people came forward. Enzo hung a small golden scale. For justice, he said, though Arya suspected it was more about ambition. Gabriella added a tiny Eiffel Tower, talking about her semester studying in Paris. The children hung candy canes and handmade ornaments, their excitement infectious. When it was Marco's turn, he held up a chess piece, a knight. Because some of us still believe in strategy, he said, his eyes finding Arya's across the room. In playing the long game. The implicit threat made her skin crawl, but she kept her expression neutral. Dante's hand tightened on hers, a silent acknowledgement that he'd caught the implication too. "Dante, Arya," Lorenzo called. "You're up. What have you brought for the tree?" They discussed this yesterday, had gone through Lorenzo's collection of ornaments to find something appropriate. Dante stepped forward with a small glass heart, simple and elegant. "For love," he said, meeting his grandfather's eyes, "the most important foundation of any marriage." The old man nodded approvingly, but his gaze shifted to Arya expectantly. She felt her pulse quicken as she realized he wanted her to say something too, to add her voice to this family ritual. Arya stepped forward, taking the ornament from Dante's hand. The glass was cool against her palm, catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across her skin. "My father used to say that love isn't about the grand gestures," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's about showing up every day, choosing to stay even when things get hard. That's what this represents to me, the choice to keep choosing each other." The room had gone quiet. She hung the ornament on a prominent branch next to a vintage one that looked like it had been there for decades. When she turned back, Lorenzo was smiling, his eyes bright with what looked like tears. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Your father was a wise man." The moment broke as the children surged forward with their ornaments, and the noise level rose again. But Dante pulled Arya aside, his expression intense. "That was perfect," he murmured. "You're better at this than I am." "I just told the truth," Arya said, "or as close to it as I could get." The afternoon melted into evening, and the house buzzed with preparation for the traditional Christmas Eve dinner. Francesca had taken over the kitchen, directing the staff with military precision. The children were corralled upstairs for naps to prevent complete chaos at dinner. The men gathered in Lorenzo's study for cigars and whiskey, a ritual that Dante explained was unavoidable. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "It's expected." "Will you be okay?" "I'll be fine," Arya assured him. "I'll stay with the women. Safety in numbers, right?" But an hour later, she found herself regretting that confidence. The women had gathered in the conservatory for afternoon tea, and the conversation had quickly turned personal. Francesca led the interrogation with surgical precision, her questions designed to expose any inconsistency in Arya's story. "So you met at a charity gala," Francesca said, stirring her tea with deliberate slowness. "Which charity, exactly?" "The Children's Hospital," Arya replied, grateful she and Dante had covered this detail. "The annual spring fundraiser." "And you were working as a caterer?" "Yes. I pick up catering shifts sometimes for extra money." "How enterprising." Francesca's smile was razor sharp. "And Dante just happened to notice you among all the staff?" "He spilled wine on his jacket. I helped him get the stain out." Arya maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. "We started talking, discovered we both loved the same obscure French novels. The conversation kind of went from there." "French novels?" Gabriella interjected with genuine interest. "Which ones?" "Camus, mostly. We both had strong opinions about The Stranger." But this was true. Arya had loved Camus in college, and she and Dante had discovered this common ground during their preparation. Dante argued that Meursault was an existential hero. I said he was just emotionally stunted. Lucia laughed. "That sounds like Dante. He always did love to argue philosophy. Remember when he was 16 and tried to convince Uncle Antonio that Nietzsche was right about everything?" The conversation shifted to memories of Dante as a child, and Arya felt the pressure ease slightly. But Francesca wasn't done. "Tell me about the proposal again. I want to hear every detail." So Arya walked through it once more, embellishing slightly, adding tiny details that made it feel more real. The way the light had looked on the water, the sound of traffic in the background, the feeling of Dante's hand shaking slightly as he opened the ring box. She pulled from memories of proposals she'd seen in movies, proposals her friends had described, weaving fiction and imagination into something that felt authentic. "And you said yes immediately?" Francesca pressed. I couldn't get the word out fast enough. I was crying too hard. Arya smiled at the manufactured memory. Dante had to ask me 3 times if that was a yes or if I was just having a breakdown. The women laughed, even Francesca cracking a genuine smile. That does sound like something that would happen to Dante. He always was terrible at reading emotional cues. He's gotten better, Arya said, surprising herself with the defense. He pays attention now, really listens when I talk, makes me feel heard in a way most people don't. This too was closer to truth than fiction. Over the past 3 days, Dante had been remarkably attentive, checking in constantly, adjusting their performance based on her comfort level. He did listen, did care about her input, treated her like a partner rather than an employee. You really love him, Teresa said softly, studying Arya's face. I can see it when you talk about him, the way your whole expression changes. Arya felt heat creep up her neck. He's easy to love, she said, and was startled to realize she meant it. Not romantic love, perhaps, but something. Respect, gratitude, genuine affection for the man who'd thrown her a lifeline when she was drowning. The conservatory door opened and Marco strolled in, despite this clearly being a women's gathering. Ladies, he said with that predatory smile, don't stop on my account. I love listening to romantic stories. This is a private conversation, Marco, Francesca said sharply. Go find the men. In a minute, I just wanted to borrow my new cousin for a moment. Arya, I found some photos of Dante as a child I thought you'd enjoy seeing. They're in the library. Every instinct screamed danger. The library was on the opposite side of the house, away from the gathering, alone with Marco, isolated, exactly what Dante had warned her against. That's sweet of you, Arya said, keeping her voice light. But I'm actually really enjoying the tea. Maybe you could bring them here? They're in a bound album. Too heavy to carry around. Come on, it'll just take a minute. Marco's eyes glittered with challenge. Unless you're afraid to be alone with me. The room had gone tense. Francesca was frowning, clearly sensing something off. Gabriella had set down her teacup, her expression worried. Teresa opened her mouth to say something, but Marco cut her off. I'm family, for heaven's sake. Arya's my cousin now. We should get to know each other. He extended his hand toward her. Please. I insist. Arya's mind raced. If she refused outright, it would create a scene, raise questions about why she was so uncomfortable with Marco. But if she went with him, she'd be breaking the cardinal rule, putting herself in exactly the situation Dante had warned her about. Actually, Gabriella said suddenly, standing, I'd love to see those photos too. Dante was such a cute kid. I'll come with you both. Relief flooded through Arya. Perfect. Let's all go. Marco's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Gabriella, don't you have that call with your boss? It can wait. Family first, right? Gabriella linked her arm through Arya's, her grip tight and protective. Lead the way, Marco. The walk to the library felt endless. Marco led them through empty corridors, his shoulders rigid with barely suppressed frustration. When they reached the library, he gestured vaguely toward a shelf. The album's up there somewhere. I must have been mistaken about which one. How careless of you, Gabriella said sweetly. Well, we're here now. Might as well look around. They spent 10 awkward minutes pretending to search for a photo album that clearly didn't exist. Finally, Marco made an excuse about needing to rejoin the men and left, his exit just shy of storming out. Once he was gone, Gabriella turned to Arya, her usual airheaded demeanor completely absent. He was trying to get you alone. You know that, right? I know. Thank you for intervening. Marco's dangerous. I've seen him corner other women at family gatherings, seen how he operates. He creates situations where you're isolated, where saying no becomes complicated. Gabriella's expression was fierce. Has Dante talked to you about him? He warned me. Told me to never be alone with any of the men in the family, but especially Marco. Smart. Dante knows what his cousin is capable of. Gabriella squeezed Arya's hand. I like you. I don't know why exactly. We barely know each other, but I do. Please be careful. Don't let Marco manipulate you into a vulnerable position. I won't, I promise. They returned to the conservatory together, and Arya spent the rest of the afternoon hyper-aware of Marco's location, making sure she was always near other people. When the men finally emerged from Lorenzo's study for dinner, she practically ran to Dante's side. He took one look at her face and pulled her into a quiet corner. What happened? She told him about Marco's attempt to isolate her, about Gabriella's intervention. With each word, Dante's expression grew darker, his jaw clenching with barely controlled anger. I'm going to kill him, he said quietly. Don't. It'll just create drama. I'm fine. Gabriella protected me. You shouldn't need protecting from my own family. Dante's hands were fists at his sides. This was a mistake. I should have never brought you here, never exposed you to this. Too late now. We're halfway through. Arya touched his arm gently. I can handle Marco, but you need to keep him away from me. Make it clear that I'm off limits. I'll do more than make it clear. Dante's voice was steel. Stay close to me during dinner. Don't leave my side for any reason. The Christmas Eve feast was spectacular, course after course of traditional Italian dishes, wine flowing freely, the long table glittering with crystal and silver. Lorenzo sat at the head, presiding over the chaos with visible pleasure. Children were allowed to join for this meal, adding to the noise and excitement. Arya found herself seated between Dante and Lucia, with Marco thankfully at the far end of the table. But she could feel his eyes on her throughout the meal, that constant pressure of unwanted attention. Halfway through dinner, Lorenzo stood, slowly, painfully, waving away offers of help. The room fell silent immediately. I want to thank you all for being here, he said, his voice raspier than yesterday. This gathering means more to me than you know. Seeing my family together, seeing the next generation growing, seeing some of you find love. His eyes found Dante and Arya. It gives me peace. He paused, breathing heavily. I'm a lucky man. I've lived long enough to see my grandchildren become adults, to see the empire I built continuing in capable hands. Not everyone gets that privilege. So tonight, I want each of you to remember what matters. Not the money, not the properties, not the family name. Family matters. Love matters. Being there for each other matters. Don't wait until you're dying to realize it. The weight of his words hung in the air. Arya felt tears prick her eyes at the raw emotion in the old man's voice. Beside her, Dante had gone very still, his hand finding hers under the table and gripping tight. Salute, Lorenzo said, raising his glass. To family, to love, to the Morellis, may we always protect our own. Salute! The room echoed, glasses raised. After dinner, the family gathered in the music room where a pianist played carols. Children performed a chaotic nativity play that bore little resemblance to the biblical story, but charmed everyone regardless. Gifts were exchanged, small tokens, nothing extravagant, the tradition being more about the gesture than the value. Dante gave Arya a first edition of The Stranger, the pages soft with age, the inscription reading, For Arya, may you never be a stranger to happiness. D. She stared at it, throat tight, wondering how he'd found it on such short notice, wondering why he'd bothered to make their fake relationship feel so real. Her gift to him was simpler, a leather bookmark engraved with a quote from Camus. In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. Maria had helped her arrange it, and when Dante read the inscription, something shifted in his expression. Thank you, he said quietly. This is perfect. The evening wound down slowly. Children were carried to bed, their protests growing weaker as exhaustion won. The adults lingered over wine and conversation, the atmosphere warm and familial. For a moment, Arya let herself imagine this was real, that she actually belonged in this loud, messy, complicated family. Around 11, Marco approached them. He'd been drinking steadily all evening, his movements slightly uncoordinated. Cousin, he said to Dante, can I borrow your wife for one dance? It's Christmas Eve. Surely you can share. No, Dante said flatly. Come on, it's just a dance. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid of anything. I simply don't trust you. Dante's voice was ice. Stay away from her, Marco. I won't ask nicely again. Is that a threat? Marco's smile turned ugly. You going to hurt me over some waitress you barely know? She's not worth it, Dante. We both know this whole thing is suspicious. You? Married? You've never even had a girlfriend longer than 3 months. That's enough. Dante stood, and Arya realized with alarm that he was truly angry, the kind of cold fury that preceded violence. You want to question my marriage? Fine, question it. But you lay one finger on my wife, you make her uncomfortable in any way, and we're going to have a problem that money can't fix. The room had gone quiet, everyone watching. Marco's face flushed red. You threatening me in front of the whole family? I'm protecting what's mine, something you've never understood how to do. What's yours? Marco laughed bitterly. She's a person, not property. Although I guess that's all she is to you, right? Another acquisition, another deal to close. Dante moved so fast Arya barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her, the next he had Marco by the collar, slammed against the wall with enough force to rattle a nearby painting. Say one more word about her, Dante said, his voice deadly quiet. Give me one more reason. Dante! Lorenzo's voice cracked across the room like a whip. Let him go! Now! For a moment Dante didn't move. Then slowly, deliberately, he released Marco and stepped back. His chest was heaving, hands still clenched into fists. What is the meaning of this? Lorenzo demanded, struggling to his feet despite Teresa's attempts to keep him seated. Fighting on Christmas Eve in my house? Marco was disrespecting Arya, Dante said, his voice still tight with anger. I won't stand for it. Disrespecting? Marco straightened his shirt, trying to regain his dignity. I asked for one dance. He's the one who went crazy. You've been stalking her since we arrived. Dante turned to face his grandfather. Following her, trying to get her alone, making her uncomfortable. I warned him to stop. He didn't listen. All eyes turned to Marco. Francesca looked horrified. Enzo was studying his brother with barely disguised disgust. Even the cousins who'd been friendly with Marco were pulling away slightly. Is this true, Marco? Lorenzo asked quietly. I was being friendly, getting to know my new cousin. Dante's being paranoid and possessive. Gabriella? Lorenzo turned to his granddaughter. You've been with Arya most of the day. Has Marco been inappropriate? Gabriella hesitated only a moment before nodding. He tried to isolate her this afternoon, lied about having photos to show her, attempted to get her alone in the library. I went with them because I didn't trust his intentions. Lorenzo's expression hardened. Marco, my study, now. No, this is ridiculous. Now. Marco shot Dante a look of pure hatred before following his grandfather out of the room. The moment they were gone, the tension broke. People started talking in hushed voices, theorizing about what would happen, rehashing old rumors about Marco's behavior. Dante turned to Arya, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Are you okay? I'm fine. You didn't have to do that. Make a scene. Yes, I did. He needed to know there are consequences, that you're not alone and unprotected. Dante's eyes searched hers. You're my wife. Real or not, that means something in this family. It means I defend you. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in Arya's chest. This was more than their contract required, more than playing a role. This was Dante genuinely angry on her behalf, willing to fight his own cousin to keep her safe. Thank you, she said softly. The party ended shortly after, people drifting to their rooms with whispered goodnights. Dante and Arya made their way upstairs in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down on them both. Once in their room with the door locked, Dante sank onto the sofa and put his head in his hands. I lost control. I never lose control. He provoked you. That's no excuse. I let him get to me, let him see that he could use you to manipulate me. Dante looked up, his expression haunted. Do you know why I was really so angry? It wasn't just about protecting you, it was because he was right. This whole thing is suspicious. You are just an acquisition, a person I hired to play a role, and I've been pretending it's something more, getting possessive over someone who isn't actually mine. Arya crossed the room and sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Maybe it started that way, but it's changed, hasn't it, these past few days? We're not strangers anymore. No, Dante agreed quietly. We're not. And when you defended me tonight, that wasn't fake. That was real. You were genuinely angry. Furious. The thought of him touching you, of him. Dante trailed off, shaking his head. You're under my protection. I take that seriously. I know you do. Arya hesitated, then took his hand, lacing their fingers together. For what it's worth, I don't feel like an acquisition. I feel like someone who matters to you. And you matter to me too. This weird friendship or partnership or whatever it is, it's real. At least to me. Dante looked at their joined hands, then at her face, his expression unreadable. You're making this complicated. Life is complicated. We might as well embrace it. He laughed, a sound with more surprise than humor. How are you so well adjusted? You've lost your father, you're drowning in debt, you agreed to fake marry a stranger, and you're handling it all with more grace than I've managed in 32 years of privilege. I don't feel graceful. I feel terrified most of the time. But my dad taught me that you keep going anyway. You show up, you do your best, you find moments of joy where you can. Arya squeezed his hand. These past few days, despite everything, the lying, the fear, Marco being creepy, there have been good moments too. Your grandfather's stories, Gabriella's kindness, even this, sitting here talking to you. It's not all bad. No, Dante said softly. It's not all bad. They sat in comfortable silence, hands still joined, the grandfather clock in the hallway counting down the final minutes of Christmas Eve. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the estate in pristine white. Tomorrow was Christmas, and then one more day after that. 2 more days of pretending, and then they could return to reality. But sitting here with Dante, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, Arya found herself wondering what reality would look like after this. Whether they would go back to being strangers, or whether something had shifted permanently between them. Whether the friendship forming in the spaces between their lies could survive once the lies ended. We should sleep, Dante said finally, but he didn't let go of her hand. We should, Arya agreed, but she didn't move. The clock struck midnight, Christmas arriving with soft chimes. Somewhere in the house, a child laughed in their sleep. The radiator clanked and hissed. And Arya Bennett sat with Dante Morelli in a borrowed room in a mansion she didn't belong in, holding the hand of a man she was paid to love, and wondered when exactly her heart had stopped following the script. Christmas morning broke with pale sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows, painting the room in shades of silver and gold. Arya woke to find herself still on the sofa, her head resting on Dante's shoulder, his arm around her waist. They'd fallen asleep talking, and now they were tangled together in a way that felt both natural and terrifying. She shifted slightly, and Dante's eyes opened immediately, alert despite the early hour. For a moment they just looked at each other, faces inches apart, the reality of their proximity settling over them like the snow outside. "Merry Christmas," Dante said softly. "Merry Christmas." Arya started to pull away, but his arm tightened fractionally, holding her in place for just a second longer before releasing her. They separated with careful deliberation, both suddenly aware of boundaries that had blurred in the night. Arya smoothed her hair, tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. This was dangerous territory, feeling things that weren't part of their contract, wanting things that couldn't be real. A knock at the door saved them from the awkward silence. "Dante, Arya?" It was Teresa's voice. "Lorenzo wants everyone downstairs in an hour. He has something important to say." The breakfast gathering was subdued compared to previous mornings. Marco was conspicuously absent, as were his parents. The cousins who remained exchanged meaningful glances, but said nothing. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, looking exhausted but determined, his color worse than yesterday. "I sent Marco home," Lorenzo announced without preamble, his voice carrying despite its weakness. "He's been asked not to return for the remainder of the holiday. His behavior toward Arya was unacceptable, and I will not tolerate any member of this family making another feel unsafe." He turned to Arya, his dark eyes serious. "I apologize on behalf of the Morellis. You are family now, and family protects its own. Marco forgot that. He won't forget again." The simple dignity of the apology made Arya's throat tight. "Thank you," she managed. "As for you," Lorenzo shifted his gaze to Dante, "you showed admirable restraint last night. I'm proud of how you defended your wife. That's what a man does. He protects what matters most." Dante nodded, his hand finding Arya's under the table. The touch was becoming second nature now, this constant physical connection that grounded them both. Breakfast passed with lighter conversation, the tension from last night dissipating. Children were allowed to open presents after the meal, their shrieks of joy filling the house. Adults exchanged gifts more quietly, and Arya found herself receiving unexpected tokens from various family members. A silk scarf from Teresa, a cookbook from Lucia, even a grudging bottle of wine from Francesca. I may have been hasty in my judgment, Francesca said stiffly as she handed over the gift. You handled Marco with more grace than he deserved, and Dante clearly loves you. That's enough for me. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Arya felt the guilt settle heavier. All these people, slowly accepting her, welcoming her into their family, and it was built on lies. The afternoon found most of the family scattered throughout the house, some napping, others playing with new toys, a few brave souls venturing outside to build snowmen with the children. Arya and Dante retreated to their room, both needing a break from the constant performance. One more day, Dante said, sinking onto the bed. Tomorrow night we drive back to the city, and this is over. Over, Arya repeated, the word tasting strange. Back to our regular lives. I'll transfer the money to your account as soon as we return. You'll be free of your debts, free to start over. He was staring at the ceiling, not looking at her. You held up your end of the bargain perfectly. Better than I could have hoped. So did you. Arya sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. Your grandfather believes it. They all do. Yes. Something in Dante's voice made her look at him more closely. His jaw was tight, his expression troubled. Arya, I need to tell you something. Before he could continue, another knock interrupted them. This time it was Lorenzo himself, leaning heavily on a cane, his breathing labored from the climb upstairs. No, you shouldn't be up here, Dante said, immediately moving to help him to a chair. You should be resting. I'll rest soon enough, permanently. Lorenzo waved away the concern. I wanted to talk to you both. Alone. Arya's heart hammered. This was it. He'd figured it out, seen through their performance. Everything was about to collapse. Lorenzo settled into the chair with a sigh of relief. Close the door, Dante. Once they had privacy, the old man studied them both with those sharp eyes. I'm not a fool. I've lived 83 years, built an empire, raised a family. You don't survive that long without learning to read people. No, Dante started, but Lorenzo held up a hand. Let me speak. I don't have the energy for interruptions. He took a shaky breath. When you first arrived and told me you were married, I was suspicious. Of course I was. You, Dante, who've never brought a woman to a family gathering, suddenly married to someone we've never heard of? It seemed convenient. Too convenient. Arya felt the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Dante had gone very still. But then I watched you together, Lorenzo continued. I saw the way you look at each other when you think no one's watching. I saw Dante defend Arya like she was the most precious thing in his world. I saw Arya stand up to this family's scrutiny with dignity and grace, and I realized something. He leaned forward, his eyes moving between them. It doesn't matter how this started. It doesn't matter if this marriage began as something practical, something rushed, something unconventional. What matters is what I see now. Two people who care about each other, who are learning to trust each other, who have the foundation to build something real. You knew? Arya whispered. I suspected, but watching you these past days, I've seen the truth. You're falling in love, even if you don't realize it yet. Lorenzo smiled, tired but genuine. Do you think I married Sophia purely for love? Her father was a baker who supplied our restaurants. The marriage was partly business, partly convenience, but we chose to make it real. We chose each other, day after day, until the love became so deep we couldn't imagine life apart. Dante's hand found Arya's, gripping tight. I brought her here to make you happy, to give you peace. I know, and it worked. Do you want to know why? Lorenzo's expression softened. Because I see my grandson finally letting someone in. I see you trusting someone enough to show them your world, to defend them, to care what happens to them. That's what I wanted for you, not a perfect love story, but the courage to try, to risk your heart instead of hiding behind work and walls. He turned to Arya. And you, my dear, you came here for money, I assume, to help with debts, to solve problems. But you've given Dante something money can't buy. Companionship, understanding, someone who sees him as a man rather than a Morelli. That's priceless. Tears were streaming down Arya's face. I'm sorry we lied to you. Don't be. You gave me exactly what I asked for. Hope. The hope that Dante won't end up like his father, alone and broken. The hope that the Morelli legacy of love will continue. Lorenzo stood slowly, using the cane for support. I'm going to die soon. Weeks, maybe days. The cancer is winning, but I'll die happy, knowing my grandson found someone worth fighting for. No, please. No more pretending, Dante. Not with me. I know this marriage started as something else, but I'm giving you both my blessing to make it real, if you want it. Life is short. Love is rare. Don't waste it because you're afraid. He moved to the door, then paused. Oh, and Arya? The money Dante promised you, take it. Start your new life, but consider starting it with him. I think you'd be surprised how well you fit together. After he left, silence filled the room like water. Arya sat frozen, tears still wet on her cheeks, trying to process what had just happened. Lorenzo had known, had seen through them. And instead of anger, he'd given them permission to make their lies truth. I need to tell you something, Dante said finally, his voice rough. What I was trying to say before he came in. The money. I was going to give it to you regardless. Whether you stayed with me or not, you earned it, putting up with my family, dealing with Marco, playing this role perfectly. Dante, but I don't want you to take the money and leave. He turned to face her, his expression raw and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. These past 5 days, having you here, waking up with you nearby, defending you, talking to you, it's made me realize how empty my life has been, how much I've been missing by keeping everyone at arm's length. We barely know each other, Arya said, even as her heart raced. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you loved your father deeply. I know you take your coffee black and you read philosophy for fun, and you have this way of seeing through people's bullshit that's both terrifying and amazing. Dante took her hands, his grip warm and solid. I know that when Marco cornered you, you didn't panic. You found a solution. I know that when my family interrogated you, you stood your ground. I know that you're kind to children and respectful to elders, and you haven't let poverty make you bitter. Well, that's not the same as knowing someone well enough to marry them. Really marry them. We're already married. The papers are real, even if the feelings started fake. Why not make the rest real too? He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to give this a chance. Stay married to me. Live in the penthouse. Take the money and use it to go back to school if you want. Or start a business, or just breathe for the first time in months. No pressure, no expectations. Just see what happens. You're asking me to gamble my whole life on a maybe. I'm asking you to bet on us, on what we could become if we're brave enough to try. Dante's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm falling for you, Arya. I didn't plan it, didn't want it, but somewhere between the dessert catastrophe and defending you from Marco to sitting up talking last night, I fell. And I think maybe you're falling too. Was she? Arya searched her feelings, trying to separate gratitude from affection, relief from attraction. But when she looked at Dante, really looked at him, she saw the man who'd offered her salvation without judgment, who'd prepared her carefully for this ordeal, who defended her honor without hesitation, who made her laugh and made her think and made her feel less alone in the world. I'm terrified, she admitted. Me too. Dante pressed his forehead to hers. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. Your family will have expectations. They'll want to see us together, want grandchildren eventually, want all the things real marriages have. Then we'll give them that. Or not. We'll figure it out together. His hands were shaking slightly, betraying his nerves despite his confident words. I'm not promising perfect. I work too much. I'm emotionally stunted. I have a family that's complicated at best and dangerous at worst. But I promise I'll never lie to you again. I promise I'll protect you. And I promise I'll try every day to be worthy of the chance you're giving me. Arya thought about her empty apartment, her crushing debts, her lonely existence. Thought about going back to serving tables and counting pennies and wondering if she'd ever feel anything but survival. Then she thought about waking up in this room with Dante nearby, about having resources to chase dreams she'd given up on, about being part of a loud, messy family that had slowly started to accept her. But more than any of that, she thought about the way her heart lifted when Dante smiled at her, the way his presence made her feel safe, the way their conversations flowed easily, touching on everything from philosophy to childhood memories to fears about the future. The way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was more than just a waitress or a hired actress, like she was someone worth cherishing. "Okay," she whispered. Dante pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Okay? Okay, let's try. Let's make this real." Arya felt tears threatening again, but this time from something that felt dangerously like hope. "I can't promise I won't mess this up. I don't know how to be wealthy or sophisticated or any of the things your world expects, but I can promise I'll be honest, and I can promise I'll try too." The smile that spread across Dante's face transformed him, softening all his sharp edges. "Yeah? Yeah." And then, because words weren't enough, Arya closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. But then Dante's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that felt inevitable, like gravity, like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Arya felt dizzy with the rightness of it. "We should probably tell everyone," Dante murmured against her hair, "that we're staying together for real. They think we're already together for real." "True. But now we actually mean it." He laughed, the sound full of surprised joy. "My nonno is going to be insufferable about this. He'll claim he knew all along. He did know all along. That's going to make him even more insufferable." They stayed wrapped in each other for a long time, listening to the sounds of the house below, children playing, adults laughing, the ordinary chaos of family. Eventually, they'd have to rejoin the gathering, put in an appearance, continue the performance that was no longer a performance. But for now, they allowed themselves this moment of truth. That evening, the family gathered for a quieter dinner than previous nights. Lorenzo presided from his chair, but he looked frailer, his color ashen. The doctor had been called twice during the day, and hushed conversations suggested his time was running shorter than anyone had hoped. After the meal, Lorenzo asked Dante and Arya to join him in his study. The room was warm and wood-paneled, filled with leather-bound books and photos spanning decades. Lorenzo settled into his chair with obvious relief. "I wanted to give you both something," he said, pulling out an envelope. "My blessing. In writing. A letter explaining that I approve of your marriage, that I witnessed your love with my own eyes, that any family member who questions it answers to me, even from beyond the grave. No, you don't have to. I want to. Marco will try to cause trouble after I'm gone. He'll claim you faked this for inheritance purposes, try to contest my will. This letter protects you both." Lorenzo's hands shook as he held out the envelope. "It also contains my personal blessing for your happiness. Read it when I'm gone. Remember that someone believed in what you could become." Dante took the letter, his jaw tight with emotion. "Thank you." "No, thank you. You gave me peace in my final days. You let me see hope instead of disappointment." Lorenzo turned to Arya. "Take care of him. He pretends to be tough, but he's softer than he thinks. He needs someone who sees that." "I will," Arya promised, meaning it with every fiber of her being. Lorenzo died 3 days after they returned to New York. The call came at dawn, Dante's phone ringing with the news they'd been expecting but weren't ready for. He took it stoically, thanked the family member who'd called, then sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. Arya wrapped her arms around him from behind, holding him as grief racked his body. They stayed like that for a long time, her strength supporting him while he finally let himself feel everything he'd been holding back. The funeral was massive, befitting a man who'd built an empire. Hundreds of people came to pay respects, from politicians to business associates, to the baker's son who'd delivered bread to Lorenzo's first restaurant 60 years ago. The Morelli family stood united, black-clad and grieving, welcoming the mourners with dignity. Arya stood beside Dante through it all, his hand gripping hers like a lifeline. When it was his turn to speak, he talked about his grandfather's wisdom, his generosity, his unwavering belief in family. His voice cracked when he mentioned Lorenzo's final blessing, his certainty that love was worth the risk. After the service, as people gathered at the estate for the reception, Francesca approached Arya. Her eyes were red from crying, her usual sharp demeanor softened by grief. "He loved you," Francesca said quietly. "In the end, you made him happy. Whatever I thought before, whatever questions I had, thank you for giving him that." "He was easy to love," Arya said honestly. "Keep loving Dante. He needs it more than he'll ever admit." Francesca squeezed her hand once, then moved on to greet other mourners. The weeks after the funeral were strange and difficult. Dante threw himself into work, managing his grandfather's estate, dealing with the complicated logistics of a family empire changing hands. Arya moved into the penthouse fully, her few possessions looking lost in the massive space. She used the money Dante had given her to pay off every debt, then enrolled in online courses to finish her degree. The freedom of not worrying about rent, about food, about basic survival was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Some days she felt like an imposter, playing house in a life that couldn't possibly be hers. But then Dante would come home late, exhausted and stressed, and she'd have dinner waiting. They'd eat together, talking about his day and her classes, slowly building the rhythms of actual marriage. He'd fall asleep on the sofa while she read, and she'd cover him with a blanket and watch him sleep, feeling something fierce and protective bloom in her chest. They were learning each other in the quiet ways, his preference for silence in the morning, her need for music while she cooked, the way they both reached for each other in the night without conscious thought. It wasn't the grand romance of movies, but it was real, built on genuine affection and growing trust. 3 months after Lorenzo's death, the will was read. Marco contested it immediately, just as Lorenzo had predicted, claiming that Dante's marriage was fraudulent and designed to manipulate the dying man. But Lorenzo's letter, written in his own hand and witnessed by his lawyer, shut down the challenge before it could gain traction. More than that, Lorenzo had structured his will carefully. The bulk of the estate went to his children and grandchildren equally, but he'd created a separate trust for Dante and Arya, not money, but properties. For building their future together, the will specified. May they fill these homes with love and laughter, as Sophia and I did. He gave us 3 buildings, Dante said, staring at the paperwork, including the one where we first met, Luminaire's building. Arya looked at the address, recognition flooding through her. The restaurant. He bought it 6 months ago. I didn't even know. It was one of his last acquisitions. Dante's voice was thick with emotion. He knew. Even then, he somehow knew. They visited the building together, walking through spaces that would need renovation, imagining what they could become. Standing in what used to be the restaurant where Arya had served tables and dumped dessert on Dante's lap, they started laughing at the absurdity of it all. "We could reopen it," Arya said. "Make it something different. A community space, maybe? Cooking classes for kids or a restaurant that employs people who need second chances." "Yes," Dante said immediately. "Let's do that. Let's build something that honors him." That night, lying in bed together, actually together now, not separated by the width of the room, Arya traced patterns on Dante's chest and thought about how far they'd come. From strangers to fake spouses to something real and growing, all in the space of a few months. "Do you regret it?" Dante asked quietly. "Saying yes to my crazy proposal?" "Every day," Arya said, then smiled at his sharp inhale. "Every day I'm terrified this is too good to be true, that I'll wake up and it'll all be gone. But regret? Never. I'm terrified too, that I'll mess this up, push you away, fall back into old patterns. Then we'll be terrified together." She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "Your grandfather was right. It doesn't matter how we started. What matters is what we choose now." "I choose you," Dante said, pulling her down for a kiss. "Every day, for as long as you'll have me." 6 months later, they stood in front of family and friends and renewed their vows. For real this time, with full hearts and honest promises. Gabriella was Arya's maid of honor, standing beside her with tears streaming down her face. Teresa officiated, her warm voice wrapping them in blessing and hope. The ceremony was small, held in the garden of Lorenzo's estate on a perfect spring day. White flowers everywhere, children running through the grass, the family gathered not in judgment, but in genuine celebration. Francesca cried openly. Even Antonio emerged from his study to attend, managing a small smile for his son. When the officiant pronounced them married, really, truly married, Dante kissed Arya like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once, like she was air and water and everything essential. The gathered crowd erupted in cheers, and for a moment Arya let herself believe in fairy tales. The reception lasted long into the night, full of dancing and laughter and toasts that grew progressively more emotional as the wine flowed. At one point, Arya found herself alone in the garden, taking a breath of cool air when she felt a presence beside her. She turned to find empty space, but in the distance she could see the small memorial they'd erected for Lorenzo, a bench under his favorite tree with a plaque that read, "Love is the foundation, build well." "We're trying, Nono," she whispered to the night. "We're really trying." A year after their first Christmas at the estate, Dante and Arya returned for the holidays with news. The family gathered in the living room where they'd first been scrutinized, where Lorenzo had given his blessing, where everything had begun. "We wanted to tell you all together," Dante said, his arm around Arya's waist. "The community center is opening in January. We're calling it Casa Sofia, after my grandmother. It'll provide free cooking classes, after-school programs, and job training for anyone who needs it." The family erupted in approval, asking questions and offering support. But Arya raised her hand for quiet, smiling at the faces that had become familiar and dear. "There's something else," she said, taking Dante's hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to need to install a nursery in the penthouse by summer." The stunned silence lasted only a second before Teresa shrieked and rushed forward, pulling them both into a crushing hug. The room exploded into chaos, congratulations and questions and excited planning. Through it all, Dante held Arya close, his eyes bright with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. That night, lying in their old room at the estate, Arya thought about the girl who'd spilled dessert on a stranger's lap a year ago. That girl had been drowning, desperate, willing to lie to survive. She'd walked into a stranger's penthouse expecting a transaction and nothing more. She never could have imagined this. Lying next to a man she loved deeply, carrying his child, surrounded by a family that had become hers, with a future full of possibility instead of just survival. "You know what's funny?" Dante murmured in the darkness. "What?" "If you'd been a better waitress, if you hadn't dropped that tray, none of this would have happened. We'd still be strangers." Arya laughed, the sound full of joy and wonder. "Then thank God I'm clumsy. Thank God you're brave. Thank God you said yes." Dante pulled her closer, his hand resting protectively over where their child grew. "Thank God for expensive mistakes and desperate proposals and grandfathers who see what we can't." Outside, snow began to fall again, just as it had that first Christmas Eve. But this time, Arya wasn't performing a role or hiding behind careful lies. This time, she was simply being herself, loved, safe, home. The contract that had started everything was long gone, shredded and burned, replaced by something far more binding. Vows spoken with full hearts, trust built through hundreds of small moments, love that had grown from the strangest soil into something beautiful and unshakable. In the end, Arya discovered that the man she'd once feared wasn't the one who trapped her. He was the one who showed her that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards, that sometimes the desperate gamble on a stranger becomes the foundation of everything that matters, that sometimes love finds you in the last place you'd ever think to look, in a ruined suit covered in creme brulee, in a business card pressed into your shaking hand, in a voice saying, "Call me tomorrow," and changing your entire life. She'd called. She'd said yes. She'd taken the leap, and she'd found her way home.